There we go. Bienvenue, Neuropa. Willkommen, die Neuropa. Welcome to Neuropa.
Welcome.
I'm Andreas. I offend people and make them unsubscribe. Welcome to my channel. I don't care. I'm far more excited to be here with my friend Raphael. Round of applause, everyone, for Raphael.
I'm Raphael. I'm here with Andreas because there's almost no other independent creators on YouTube.
Yeah, it's weird. You wouldn't think it. You'd think I was some sort of like state-operated boy, but I'm independent. Free agency. Hey, look. Shout out from our buddies. Shadowban Podcasts. Good to see you. Tripping Wi-Fi equal unsubscribe. Wait, this is the part of the song where it goes. Bum, bum.
I mean,
Well,
you may be in a
I
special
wanted-
situation, but Germany actually is quite known, at least on the countryside, to have very bad internet. And some people have been speculating that's because they wanted, at least for some point, some time to push for 5G, and deliberately did not properly extend the cable networks as they could have.
Oh, those freaking. Merkel. When you think, what's two words you think of when you think of Merkel, right? Mine are war criminal. What do you got?
Triangle and G7, I guess. Didn't she start to kick Putin out officially? No, wasn't that during her time?
Yeah, I think there's another two words for her, which are like sexually frustrated. I think is also what I would say about Merkel. But you know, this isn't about her. This isn't really about her. But we're going to talk about a lot of things today on Europa. Well, first off, let's talk about Eurasia and Tehran. I mean, I know that this is about other things, but this is December 11th, which is the day that the UFOs were supposed to come down. And actually, was that the 3rd? No, today's the day when that the Luigi Mansion kid was supposed to, he had that video after the assassination attempt of the United Health Care thing, and then they said it was this kid Luigi Mansion. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, I heard about that there was some kind of supposed attack on someone. I did not catch the Luigi Mansion connection yet, I think.
Oh, okay. So Luigi Mangione.
Okay, well.
Luigi Mangione. Like, really? Cool, America. That's a good one. So on the same time that, like, we're worrying about court trials, transitions of power, whatever's going on, there's also been a lot of mansion memes recently. If you've ever played Luigi's Mansion, so
Briefly,
there was all
yeah.
these... Oh, man, it's a good game. And also just there was a lot of memes for whatever reason in the last month or two, and last week especially, that were about Luigi. I was seeing Luigi memes everywhere, up and down. And then all of a sudden, I mean, like, I made a Luigi meme like a week or two ago. Like, I just happened to use Luigi in one of the characters, and I was doing some APM stuff. So it was just funny that Luigi Mangione, like, when we're looking for, like, where's Mario? I don't know. There was something weird about it. Anyway, that was only so we could bring up what happened, which was that Syria is, like, Alderaan right now in Star Wars. Syria is wiped off the face of the map in so many respects. We have 48 hours of, actually at this point, what is it? That was like 7 hours ago. So it's like 60 hours, 48 to 60 hours, who knows exactly, of airstrikes from Israel that have wiped out the entire, I mean, everything's gone. All of the military bases are gone. The entire, the government infrastructure of Syria, there is no more Syria. Not the way we used to think of Syria. So the tomb of Assad's father was set on fire by rebels while Israel strikes Syria And yeah, you know, I think glory
Okay,
to greater Israel. What can I
but
say? Oh, and I'm really sorry for doing this to the vital vortex. Okay, we're good. Continue.
okay, just briefly because I didn't catch the latter part in the news cycle yet. So you're saying, because what I got is that officially Bashar al-Assad was ousted. Of course, it's very strange and again makes one think of the world stage because at least officially Turkey apparently said Erdogan was like, oh, we extended our hand. Why did you not listen? Well, I'm not exact because I still don't exactly claim to understand the situation with the Kurds, only from what even Colonel Tana Watson talks about, who's talking about the Gladio stuff, is she kind of explained it as a deliberate, how would you say, black not black powder or not smoking powder, how do you call it, gunpowder keg, basically one of many that's deliberately set
Gunpowder.
up. So
Yeah,
I'm kind of like wondering how honest Erdogan is in his statements there. And the other thing I'm wondering about generally is last time there was any issue, from what I recall or understand, Bashar al-Assad just made a phone call to Putin, and very quickly, the whole thing was carpet bombed by the Russians. So what was different this time is what I'd like to understand, because it's very much looks like a very planned change of guards rather than really some kind of
absolutely.
conflict. Also
Well, the
because
writing's been on the
they did
wall.
not really fight them at all, apparently, when they then said, oh, now we're going to take over the cities. And so it
Well,
was so unexpected,
Israel
but I don't believe it was
has
unexpected at all, except for the news cycle.
Israel has military supremacy and weapons that not only do they have better weapons, but they have absolutely incredible technology for capturing drones. Right? They're able to capture anything in the sky. They can actually send out a rocket drone that can take out a drone, and they can stop any sort of air assault. And so, any of these anti air artillery trucks that they had, they're completely useless. And also, there's just so much effort that's been put into destroying Syria because Syria is the most secular state. It was the one that had the most Christians in it that were most openly allowed to worship, and Assad kept it, ironically, like more like France in a lot of ways. And now that doesn't mean that they didn't also have extremists there, and I think that's going to be a lot of people's point, and a fair point at that, that Syria was definitely, I mean, it's not fair to just call it a breeding ground for terrorism. I'm not sure that that's the right word, because that's no different than the Midwest of the United States at that point. But it was a secular place that allowed for different ideas to flourish, which is exactly the kind of place you need to have either Christians and Jews living in a city, or also to have terrorists that can proliferate. Because otherwise, it's like Iran. It's really difficult. And let's put an example like Iran. You don't have that freedom, so it's far less likely to end up with terrorism. And the reason being that the state itself would be involved in anything that happens. So it would never be a non-state actor. You have to have the state involved even with the religious outreach, the moral authority. So Syria was completely different than that. But Syria was also a really important strategic point because of BRICS. And I think it became evident that BRICS, with this new economic deal, it wasn't going to benefit everyone in Syria. And that's why it's kind of sad for Assad's family, because they were at kind of de facto nobility of Syria. But that doesn't put you in a very good position for the change of the guards, like you just said. So there's a lot of information that's been circulating, and I think we're gonna call it fake news or something until it's confirmed. Because I don't, I mean, like I can only deal with YouTube as well as I can. And by the way, did you know that this is on? That we have escaped to other platforms? Just saying. Anyway, according to the Kremlin, Syria's ousted ruler Bashar Assad is now in Russia. However, no current picture or video exists to prove this claim, and this lack of evidence has fueled speculation about his fate. Okay. But I read also earlier, you'll lose, Russian agents told Assad as they organized his escape. setting up for him to be able to get out of Syria. So this is a possibility that they've actually done this. I kind of believe this is true. Who knows? They could also have just created a fake patsy family, and maybe Assad is just. I'm sure we're gonna have at least 6 people in the audience to say Assad is actually like, you know, like Kevin Costner in a mask or something. You know, there's a lot of weird conspiracies about who these politicians and nobles really are. But you know, if you've read
I
about it,
mean,
like they hacked into Assad's phone and saw all of his emails and everything. And you know what they found? Like, well, all of his dirty secrets. You know what his sick fetishes are? Psych, nothing. It's just love letters to his wife. Like literally, the weirdest. Yeah, just this clean cut guy who loves his wife. So, all right, sorry, you're gonna say.
well, then it's he. If that story is correct, then of course he is not very suitable to be a head of state. Within the new world order, at least.
Yeah, it
What
doesn't seem
what
like he
is
likes to eat kids. It's weird.
what
Yeah.
is curious about him, and it's similar. I mean, actually, with Putin, where we do see that he looks very different from 10 years ago. We discussed that before. Ever since he divorced his wife, and even supposedly his wife made strange statements.
Mm.
But along with Putin and I'm not sure how much I know with Gaddafi and also with Bashar al-Assad, the few interviews you get in the West, at least for a Western audience who can somewhat differentiate, it seems a little bit astounding because very often these individuals seem more well-spoken and more intelligent than whoever gets put up front in the West. That may also be a deliberate thing to some extent, but I just find that curious that the few times you listen to Bashar al-Assad, it actually seems, yeah, how should I say, in terms of politician level, he appears to be smarter, let's say maybe as a royalist type leader, than the Republican type leaders, many of which we have in Europe, for example, right? I
Mm-hmm.
always find that very curious how, at least for the past few decades, you had a few of these outliers or, old monarchist nobility, maybe in Middle Eastern countries. And somehow it seemed they were more of a, dare I say, Renaissance man in terms of being, educated in many topics and being well spoken than most of the leaders we got in the West for the past 20 years, I would say at least. So I just always
Well,
find that strange.
yeah. So now you have to wonder what's going to happen for Bashar, or whatever we're calling Bashar, because he's going to be living as a diaspora protectorate. If this is, I mean, under this circumstance, it'll be considered that he's living as a protectorate in Moscow. It'll probably be part of Russia and more collectively BRICS strategic war against NATO, and I think that's going to be
In Syria,
well. They're going to. I think that what that's the question is how is it going? How is the Syrian diaspora of its former state government going to affect because when Russia became the Soviet Union, there was still the Russian Federation president living in New York City for until the 70s. You know what I mean? Until the 60s or 70s, they had a fake government that was they were the Russian de facto head of state without any head, any authority over the state. And the entire time they were rejected by the Soviet Union. So the same thing could happen here, where he's considered to be like a king without a country, and
right?
that might affect the international scale of the United Nations, because the United Nations and the ICC, International Criminal Court, decide what war crimes are and who are states, and that's a bigger deal than it sounds like. If somebody in Africa murders somebody else and they decide, was this person a soldier or was this person a terrorist, that can be decided often by the ICC. And it's a big, again, whether you commit a war crime or whether you're a terrorist changes everything about how you're charged with your crimes and what we decide about if this
Yeah,
is
or
a
whether you're just a soldier in a legitimate invasion, then
yeah.
you go free. So
Yeah, because a legitimate engagement of war, the rules of war have to be decided by groups of these. I mean, think about it, like the how whether or not they used mustard gas or whether or not these people used the wrong equipment, because it's all a game. You know, you're murdering people, but there's a way to murder people, and you have to be very careful about it. That you put your horse in a rubber suit in case the mustard gas attacks him. So yeah, it also affects everyone else because of the way criminal court case law works, which is that then uh, the international relations between these anarchistic states rely, for now, on the United Nations, which is similar to 100 years ago. We had the League of Nations, and they say, okay, well, this was not sportsmanlike the way you did it. How do we justify that? Well, look what they did in Africa. Now look what they're doing in Syria. Look what they're doing. And so, if at a certain point an argument arises about the rules of war and the rules of engagement of war, we might end up, well, originally, this is how the League of Nations was shattered. They stopped having confidence, international relations confidence in the League of Nations engagements of war, and all bets were off. How did that end, right? I mean, who cares what you think about atomic bombs, but that's kind of, it goes World War I, League of Nations, rules about mustard gas, and then people start using mustard gas instead, and it's horrible. To World War II, no United Nations yet, so the war goes to the atomic bomb level of destruction, where entire cities are wiped off the face of the earth, or worse. I mean, look at Germany. It didn't have to take atomic bombs, just completely destroying places, putting people into fields to stand in the mud to freeze to death, just breaking all the rules. So that could happen really quickly based on Syria. If we stop accepting that Syria's government is a legitimate government, or the Russians refuse to accept the new, and BRICS economically refuses to accept the new government, that could shatter the United Nations in a weirdly quick way. I mean, it's not, there's barely any authority that the United Nations has now. And if that happens, then yeah, we could end up in the most crazy possible war scenario, which is where there are essentially no good faith terms to the battle engagement. Like anything could happen. Anything you want to do in war there'd be nothing that was off the table. And that's kind of scary, right?
So I sent you something that may be correlating to what we're talking about. I'm not sure if this page exists in English officially, or you have to translate it, which would be very strange.
The 14-point program is a peace order for the First World War in Europe, with the American President Woodrow Wilson on 8th January 1918 a programmatic speech in front of both cases on the U.S. Congress outlined. Open, publicly concluded peace treaties. According to this, there should be no longer any secret international agreements, but diplomacy should always be carried out sincerely and in front of the world. Unrestricted freedoms of navigation on seas outside the territorial waters in peace as well as in war, except for those seas that are wholly or partially blocked by the international action to implement international contracts. Interesting. So actually, that's interesting. The establishment of anarchy in the 14 points. Possible elimination of all economic barriers and establishing equality for the trading conditions for all nations that join peace to maintain it. Corresponding mutual guarantees for the restriction of the armor of the nations to the lowest level that is compatible with internal security. Free, unbiased, and completely impartial compensation for the colonial claims based on the precise observance of the principle that when deciding on such sovereign issues, the interests of the populations concerned are just as important as the legitimate claims of the government. Their legal title is to be decided. Interesting. Colonial claims.
So we don't need to go through all of those.
Done.
But, all right. No, sure, we can go through all of them. Sure, go on.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because this is all right. The reason I want to finish it, we'll take a second though, because we're at 6, is that this is the only thing that we could hope for, is that anyone would honor their agreements, their former agreements with other countries. And there are key states that have made contracts in wartime, during maritime, in the pirate times. So that's going to be, essentially up to the 14 points in the early 20th century when we have these agreements. So that would be the hope, is that we go into, have you seen Gangs of New York? Before you get into a battle and you say, well, you're going to have what? Sticks? You're going to have stones? You're going to have guns? Okay. And then we're going to meet on Thursday. We're going to have men and women? Okay. And then where are the lines? Where are the lines before we come at it? That's a fair and just war. battle.
Yeah, it's what they say. So why I actually brought this up, I believe I even learned about this in history in school. And all I know is the little bit from what I remember about it was just that whenever we learned of it, and then I was like, well, it's a cool story, bro, but obviously nobody is really executing it. I mean, show me where there is no secret agreements or whatever. I could even tell you not only about secret international agreements, which there are plenty of. Let's just consider the lockdown period, how much of the contracts were blocked out. And also, we have domestic, of course, agreements which are secret, as I mentioned to you. Even for the Austrian government, all the parties that lost the last election, well before the election, already basically agreed on forming a coalition government deliberately against the popular vote, if anyone can believe that. So I just think it's funny, and also it kind of makes me question, did this really happen the way it is described here? Because at least David Ewing Jr. a few times said that there's also some issues with the official history of Zionism, for example, that also here maybe certain people or letters were put up in front, and what's really happening in the back is different. I don't know, but the thing is, we can just go on, and then it may be obvious as to why I brought this up, but it's only on the last point, and then we can go further from there.
All right. Clearance to the entire Russian territory. An agreement on all issues relating to Russia, which ensures the best and freest cooperation of the other people for Russia, to bring about an uninhibited opportunity for the independent determination of his own political development and national politics, and to give him a warm welcome into the society of the free nations among the self-chosen state institutions, even more help of any kind that may be in need and wish for on his own. The treatment granted to Russia by its sister nations, which infers their connection to the royal family, over the next few months will be a touchstone of their goodwill, their understanding of their needs, as well as their intelligent and selfless compassion. Do you want to go into Belgium? That's interesting. Belgium, the whole world will agree to this, be cleared and restored without any attempt to limit its sovereignty. Okay. Even the Congo has to be like, wow. Which it enjoys like any other free people. No other single step. No offense to Belgium, but you guys get how ironic that is, right? All you Belgians get that? Okay. No other single step like this one will serve to restore trust among the nations to the laws that they have created themselves, and that they have been decisive for their relationships with one another. Without this healing step, the entire structure and validity of the international law damaged forever. Well, this explains Brussels, right? Like, this is kind of why it's like that and all scary. Oh, God. The entire French territory must be cleared and the occupied parts restored. The injustice that France in 1872 related to the Alsace-Lorraine through Prussia has been done and has shaken world peace for almost 50 years. Must be made up for so that peace can be restored in the interest of all. Okay, yeah, this is like, there's some lore behind each one of these. Correction of borders, Italy, according to the precisely recognizable boundaries of the ethnicity. You know what that's about, right? Like in North Italy, you know the deal with what's it called again?
The genetics, you
The
mean?
German region of North Italy. No,
Oh, you
like
mean Südtirol,
in
Südtirol,
northern Italy.
Southern Tyrol, yeah, Südtirol.
Sutier, is that like yeah, Tyrol. Yeah, so where they speak Italian, they speak German. So you know why that is? You know the whole thing behind that, right? Like the Italian after the war, they're like, everyone has to return the land to the way it was according to the maps. Everyone bring us your maps and show us the way it used to be. And Italy shows up with these fake maps and they like included part of Germany. And so all of a sudden they like, never mind the fact that these people don't speak Italian, aren't Italian. Yeah, we're just
So
gonna
it's
make
like,
it part of Italy.
is that supposed to be a real story? I mean, how can you have any three diplomats sitting on a table in good faith and come to
They
such
don't
a
have to be sitting at a
conclusion?
table. They don't have to be sitting at the table together. That's the thing. They just demand it of this confessed power. And at the table, they say, okay, what we'll do is we'll go get the maps and we'll sort it all out. We're just going to put it back the way it was. But then because one of them is the losing power, the other ones are able to manipulate this and they can't really do anything about it. And afterwards, that is essentially an illegal agreement. So I think that's what they're inferring here. I could be wrong, but it looks like that's kind of the point when they bring up Italy. And they say, was it the correction of the border of Italy according to the precisely recognizable boundaries of the ethnicity, right? So they're saying, give back the freaking German part. I think that's kind of the inference of Tyrol. All right, could be wrong. The peoples of Austria-Hungary, whose places amongst the nations we want to see protected and secure, should be given the freest opportunity for autonomous development. Well, okay, but you took away 80% of their land. Romania, Serbia, Montenegro should be cleared. The occupied territories returned. Serbia should be given free and safe access to the sea. No thanks. And relations amongst the various Balkans to each other should be regulated by friendly agreements according to the existing historical guidelines of belonging and nationality. International guarantees for political and economic independence and the inviolability of the territory of the various Balkan countries should be created. The lack of the word Croatia in Regulation 11 offends me. The Turkish parts of the Ottoman Empire, unconditional independence should be guaranteed. Nice. The other nationalities, on the other hand, which are currently under Turkish rule, should be given a reliable security of life and a completely undisturbed opportunity for independent development. Well, I mean, that sounds cute, but why didn't you give the Kurds... Okay, maybe because they don't have enough literature to really be defined. I don't know. The Dardanelles should be open continuously under the international guarantees as a free passage for ships and trades of all nations. An independent Polish state should be established that would have to understand all areas inhabited by undisputed Polish people. Free and secure access to the sea should be open to this state, and its political and economic independence should be guaranteed by the international agreements. Well, what year is this again?
Is this the Pale of Settlement? 1918. 1918.
Okay, so another reason. So when did they move? The moving of Poland. When did they do this?
I'm
West.
just checking. Oh, here. Pale of Settlement was the western region of the Russian Empire where permanent residency by Jews was allowed.
So it was Stalin.
And beyond which Jewish residence was mostly forbidden.
Yeah,
it existed from 1791 to 1917 de facto until 1915 and included territories such as Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Bessarabia, Lithuania, and Crimea. Crimea was part of the Pale of Settlement.
Yeah, so that's kind of that was my question, looking at the older lines, because originally, if you think about it, Polish, you have the Polichuks living in southwest Ukraine. And so you would have considered super far east more parts of Poland, but that would have been insane to make this giant region where there were so many other groups that lived through there. Cossacks, Chechens. I mean, between the Polichuks and Poland was a lot. Yeah, but the point is also that then after the war, we have the moving west of Poland. So the, taking of parts of Germany. And a big part of this was so that Russia would have been bigger. So it moved Ukraine in to the west, closer to Europe, by moving Poland into the west, closer. And this is multiple times overdone, that they forced the Poles further and further west. Every few centuries, it seems, the Poles were pushed super far west. But they did. A lot of the Poles came from around it seems like they came from around the Ukrainian Polichuk region. So, all right. And a general association, and that's okay. So that's also why it's interesting that they're moving Poland towards this sea. But a general association of nations must be established with special contracts for the purpose of mutual guarantees for political independence and the territorial inviolability of both small and large states. And is that the League of Nations that they're talking about creating?
Yeah, and actually you can just click on that because I think it's pretty cool. Even the logo they have, I just saw it now again. But don't worry, it's a blue star, not a red one. You're muted, Andreas.
It's all right. I'm just looking at it being like a naval. It makes so much sense that it's essentially a naval confederation.
Yeah, well, I just want to know, is this like a Moorish star? Is it a communist star? You know, what's this supposed to be exactly?
It's definitely a Navy star.
Humanist.
Interesting. Well, this star looks different.
Well, I'm
So
not
this
sure
is a
if those
different
are
star,
originals.
right? I mean,
It
look
looks
at
very much digitally recreated, so I don't know.
let's look at it. Let's see if we can find.
It's a star in a jar. It's a star within a star, yes.
You can't. Vintage. Can we find a vintage one? Not as easy to find the original. I mean, I don't know now which is the original because they're all
So
different
much
looking
for
stars.
the well-documented history of the 20th century.
Yeah. I think it was probably that weird star. That kind of makes sense to me. But I don't know for sure. Who amongst us can remember? Who amongst us can say? Crazy. Yeah. So the League of Nations, though, created by this sort of mandate, it seems like interesting that so much of the mandate is naval based. I guess it had to be because that's the rules of engagement has always been between the states through the waters. Interesting. Well, so yeah. You want to move on to the actual content of the day? Raphael brought me this list of.
If we want to stay on topic, we could actually start with the politics section. Andreas, let's see. You're refreshing yourself. You can add yourself to the stage again, hopefully. Yes, Andreas, you're back. I think you're back, yeah, but you're muted.
Is it working now? Sorry, buddy. I had some. I tried to open that page and it freaked out my computer, I guess, because of the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, this is some stuff that Raphael brought me that I'm pretty excited about. We're calling it Polytricks, which is like a solid reggae reference to Peter Tosh. Shout out to Step and Razor Red X. But we're gonna start with his story. Michael Jackson's one of my favorite Michael Jackson albums. And in this list, we're gonna get to the Nachiketa, starting with the Mongo Iliad. Was it Mongoliad? Well, we'll see. And then also the Law of Ethelbert, guest appearance on Untold History. You'll see. You'll see what we're going to do. Cleopatra to Christ. Anyway, let's just start with the first one. Here's the Mongoliad. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I believe this is one of the things that came up somewhere that I myself have no clue about, but please scroll a little bit down because I believe there was something about the symbolism or something like that, which is where I even pulled that up. But here it even says it's something new. So, but maybe, wait, I'm not sure if this is the correct link. Give me a second.
Yeah, this is weird. It looks like it's some sort of a video game.
App. Yeah. I think I'm talking about something else. That's kind of funny now. Okay, I know I'm talking about something else, I believe. But here it's funny. This is a book written by geeks, it says. Okay, no, I wanted to refer to something else, I believe. This is the wrong link. Maybe. Okay, here it says. Okay, no, but this may just be fiction, which I'm finding now. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know. I
this
don't
thing
remember
here
why.
It's chill. It's
yeah,
chill.
I'm not.
I found this other book.
Yeah.
Also, here's an actual book called Mongolia.
Well, but I'm not sure if that's even what I thought about either. Or why? Sorry.
Raphael works in mysterious ways.
A fictionalized accounts of like Mongolian invasions, whereas we understand Gleb Nosovsky on Serge Boba's channel in the translation says that also there's issues with this Mongol trope invasion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But you think it might be that one? I can go look at some images. I like the idea of like an Iliad of the Mongolians. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. But we can also just go on anyhow. Here in the history section, there is not so much I can talk of. It's more like references I wanted to bring up.
Okay. How about the Law of Ethelbert? A set of legal provisions
Right.
written in Old English, probably dating back to the 7th century, from Kent.
So this was recently brought up by Fresh Translator with Nachiketa on the weekend. And this was just one of these examples where he claimed, because we were just like talking about Fomenko and, what is true or not in history or in chronology. And then he suddenly said, oh, well, but there's these and these originals. And I was like, well, please show me any original you can find. And he claims this should be an original document. I'll have to look at it properly and also see what David says about it, because by now I'm very, let's say, suspicious of anything that's claimed to be original, especially if it's claimed to be hundreds and hundreds of years old. So this is just a reference for a supposedly original document that should be preserved to this day. But I'll look into it to see if there's anything to it, really.
I would say there's some truth to it. But like that's maybe my bias is the idea that in World War One and Two, back to that time period, because England is an Anglo-Saxon country originally, a lot of things going on there with the Celts and the Picts and everything, and now today with everybody else. But the amount of Germanic origin of the relationship between England and Germany and Germanic people just generally was and is today even pretty strong, super strong, and even beyond the royal family, right? The royal family, the House of Wilhelm, which became the House of Windsor, changed their name to the House of Windsor to hide the fact that they were essentially a German family. And you've got King George of Hanover, all etc. So the idea that most of England in World War One would have been pretty down to be in an alliance with Germany. They're like sister nation, as we said earlier about Russia, right? But more like their brother nation. So there had to be so much effort made to convince British people that they were ideologically separate and apart from the Germanic people. So I think there's also a big
effort. One idea that David has brought up to me a few times, and this is something that I guess is impossible to find, it seems, in official mainland history, but the idea that sometime before what we would call the First World War, he mentioned that Germany, quote unquote, declared something like an Islamic caliphate, whatever this would have meant at that particular time, and that was part of the reason that gave so much motivation or impetus to exactly the type of social and psychological and war engineering you're speaking of right now. But this is a reference I don't think I have seen anywhere in mainline publication yet. But this would of course be a relevant aspect, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, that's a good example of why things seem like they could be as old as that, though, because you look at in Bosnia and Mostar, Sarajevo, and you have essentially wherever there are the Muslims rather. The Muslims had a literary recording in by hand, which they continue to this day, scribing down and copying books. And so they have books that have been copied so many times, and that takes a certain amount of years and generationally how long it takes for someone to need to do it again, that they can say, oh, it goes back to the 9th century, right? Or something like that, which is that's the historical continuity that we could rely on the most probably, or the Muslim records. But simultaneously in Germany, because of that, in the 15th century, 13th to 15th century, you have the scribe culture where they're constantly doing the same thing for the churches and for the elite of the Catholic Church, which makes it really convenient to change things at that point. Because at that point, then they've hired them and they can say, hey, while you're copying the book, just make sure that you change the year, right?
Just make sure it fits our narrative and put the Jesuit stamp on top. Exactly that.
Totally.
And the second thing is that then, of course, with the linotype, which is why we have all these neatly spaced out books, another revision would have happened around 1900, Whereas again, those books that, just as you mentioned, if they are really old, already were copied many times over just to preserve them, then potentially changed in copying them over if you hired the guy who's your monk and, making sure that your narrative fits. And then you have another point where you need to adapt it for print, where again, a lot could be changed. So I have to look closer at this document, whether this, could be print or it's an actual manuscript. And then, look at, there's apparently different techniques how to make something look or appear old, right? We could look at the language, whether there's any other proof. No, there wouldn't, of course.
Especially not during the time of the Jesuit suppression, when they had to hide who they were and, be essentially like a secret society by law for a period of time. That would be crazy, right? Like, that wouldn't make sense for the Lutheran King George of Hanover over England to have been a Jesuit, right? Would it? The Jesuit who was hiding as a Lutheran in the Holy Roman Empire that was no longer under the Sophia Naturalization Act and could take over England, making German, British royalty. But I think it's still interesting then that these are showing that how close, because this is what we know about the 15th century, at least, that at least in the last 400 or 500 years, they were speaking some sort of a Persian Gothic Germanic language, which is pretty much Old German, right? And so that makes a lot of sense that they would have this. I think that that's fair. I know that Ewing's going to say this is backwards Arabic or something, but it is what it is. Okay. What about and it's all from the Textus Rofensis.
Makes it sound very official.
Okay.
Tome of Rochester.
Well, it sounds kind of, yeah. Which is cool because the Earl of Rochester, who's my favorite, John Wilmot. Well, might as well bring that up for a second. Earl of Rochester, John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester. Have you ever seen this guy? I think we might have talked about him at some point. Where's the painting of him? Here. This is his best painting. Look what he's doing with that monkey. How cool is this guy? Like, right? You gotta understand, this is like the most liberated person in 16 or 1700, at that point in history. And so for him to come from the Rochester, I find that interesting. What's up with that macaw monkey? Okay. This is guest appearance on Untold History, 1871 Corporation with Coach Mel, Ron Parton, and Warhamster Brady.
This is part of quite a few references I have here. This is something I'll actually have to quite look at proper first, and then we can discuss it. What's interesting here, it seems to be talking about this idea, as you can see, of the 1871 Corporation, and people have different conceptions as to how that came about. And apparently, supposedly here, they may be revising some of those. So even though I didn't watch it yet, I wanted to leave it in the list, but I would watch this one for sure. Because of course, you may know of this movie called, I think it's literally called Decorporation, right? Or Corporatocracy or something like this. And there's also another movie like Corporation Revisited, which is quite recent, which I think the first one came out in 2006 and was a very decent movie, explaining the basics of the legal structure of a corporation. And maybe, or apparently here, they're going to revise some of those things. But what I'll do is I'll just look at the book she wrote and see if we get a summary.
Did anyone else find Rumble? I want to plug you guys, Rumble. Oh, did I put my Rumble up? Oh, I didn't. Maybe that's why I'm cursed with this. But yeah, for whatever reason, I find Rumble kind of unbearable. I know I want to like it and all, but I never did, and I preferred Odyssey, and now I can use X. And just every time we try to show a Rumble link, it's freaking just the commercials, 5 seconds. I know you're gonna be like, "Hey, that's what it's like when we watch YouTube on your channel." I know. I'm just saying. I don't know what to say about it, but I think Rumble needs a little work. Is all I'm saying. I don't know. How about Gunnar Heinzen?
I'll just briefly read the summary of the last thing, so just to get a basic idea. So it says, She examines the facets that have informed the narrative of the United States being nefariously transformed from a constitutional republic to a corporation run by powerful and clandestine entities intent on subverting America's experiment in freedom. So the truth behind the events of 1871, a web of deception that has clouded our understanding of governance and citizenship. So I may just be about the general idea, because it came to my idea. Okay, it talks about the Organic Act of 1871, District of Columbia. I mean, that's something that's somewhat known, I think. Some claim citizenship changed, covering groups like the Moorish Society, sovereign citizens, and state nationals, and their claims for maritime law, gold fringe flags, bond paper, etc. Some claim the USA Corporation went bankrupt, that Trump bankrupted it. Mel shows the documents used and describes how they are misapplied, and the one with Trump's name is actually fake. Yeah.
Rocket
Anyways, maybe something
Zulu.
interesting to check out.
Good to see you in the chat. Yeah.
What's up? Yeah, here another one I didn't watch yet. This is apparently very new, though. As
We'll
you
do
can
another
see.
thing soon.
Indeed, we'll do. This also relates to history, and here apparently this guy shows 700 years missing or something like that. So I'll probably watch this one and then try to correlate with what Fomenko says, what David found, and so on. I mean, honestly, my impression by now, if I'm applying all these reductions, which appear to be necessary, there's maybe about 300 to 500 years history left.
Yeah, I would say there's probably like 900 years of history. I did like that video. And that doesn't mean I don't believe in prehistory either. Like, I'm just saying in terms of actually like recorded history, I still believe in probably about 900 years of somewhat recorded history being somewhat, so I wouldn't say reliable, but accessible to an extent. But I do think a lot of this disproves our continuity narrative that these places are super ancient and we're just gaps for centuries in between any sort of progress, because it doesn't really explain the durability of these structures through this extreme weather and all of these different environmental conditions that we now know happen. So easy to actually find those things out. Once you start accumulating knowledge, you can understand exactly where the stars would have been, and if these genetically modified plants like could have existed for that period of time, or if animals were able to actually exist in these places. Basically, it destroys everything that we wanted to believe about these dark gaps. The dark gaps disappear, and all of a sudden, if you just remove the dark gaps, things start to make a lot more sense on top of each other. Although, yeah, we talked about this last time. Did you see enough of this video to comment more on it?
Oh, we already? No, I still didn't yet. I may apparently just put it up there again. I have to watch it.
Shame on you, Raph. No, it's okay. I didn't either. I just know that we watched it because I could see here that it started from the middle there, where at some point we looked at it, and I remember.
But also, it's very new. So this is less than a month old, apparently. At least the upload itself, even though the content is
November
from 2016.
Yeah. All right, everybody, make sure you're going to the Neuropa page so you can check it out. That way you guys can review it. I don't know. No, we'll watch it.
Of course.
We'll watch it.
Well, that's the idea. Ideally, we'll have all the comments
Cleopatra to Christ
explaining everything that we didn't get to. Yeah, so this another thing I didn't watch, also in this case, because I only recently stumbled on it, and it's a series, actually. And also, I'm not sure if I can agree with enough with the basic premises to be able to watch it. And my head not exploding. So basically, this is a guy recommended because of the show we did on the weekend, where you actually were featuring as well, where we spoke about the question of original documents and different timeline and chronology ideas. And then a few individuals commented on that video and said, please check out Ralph Ellis. So at the very least, I wanted to make sure I reference him. And as you can see, this is actually a full lecture series of 26 lectures. So there's quite something he has to say about, I guess, starting with biblical history, or here as it says, from Cleopatra to Christ. So anyone who's interested in a deep dive, you can check him out. To what extent, it is correlated to other data, I cannot tell you yet.
Kind of seems reasonable. The whole Marcus Aurelius and Cleopatra or Mark Antony. Okay. Then when Kim Jong II reached out to Russia in 2012
Yeah.
from
So
journeyman.
I have to
Who do you like?
say these kind of North Korea related documentaries are for some reason incredibly fun to watch. This is actually
Yeah, I love
what this
Korea.
is, 'cause Journeyman apparently is a distribution company, and this one is apparently an original Vice documentary from 2012, if I understood this correctly. And what they're
Oh,
trying
is
to
it a
do
re?
here,
Is it just a re-upload? I remember this video.
yes, yes.
I,
So they're trying to get into this Russian or North Korean logging camp in Russia, and it's kind of hilarious to see how they fumble about, and also, I guess, kind of American how they choose to deal with certain situations. But yeah, I think it's just always interesting to watch individuals with, highly differing ideologies or how should I say, background act very differently, or even just the fact that you have one, North Korean worker being interviewed, and in the beginning he's very shy and so on, and then they kind of tell him, "Oh, don't worry, we'll blur out your face and so on," and then you see him smiling. It's like, nah,
what I find really interesting about Vice is that it started in Canada, like most American mind control experiments.
I mean, I'm not going to talk about Austria and Germany now, but I brought this up before that there is a strange correlation, both in terms of population, it's about 1/10. So both Germany to Austria and US to Canada. And while Austria today is not technically monarchist or anything like that, may I'm actually curious as to why, but it could be that there is more harkening back to monarchy in Austria, even though the noble titles, I believe, still are allowed in Germany, but not in Austria. But aside from that, I guess also you have the common trope that it's said, maybe not in the same way as Canadians. How should I say that? Maybe Canadians are how would you call their communication style compared to Americans? Maybe they are not as blunt as Americans, not as maybe. And you could probably say the same about Austrians if you want to generalize in a very superficial trope type sense. But in any case, I find it a little bit strange that there is these pairs, it looks like. And you have strange interconnections between those two in both cases. So both Canada, US, and Austria, Germany. Whereas you could
Well,
say, with good reason, they mainly speak the same language. Why is it even different states? Would be the obvious question from me. Yeah,
well, like I mean, I don't know if you mean just by accents you're talking about, because yeah, Canadians speak very clearly, and it's like literal cleanliness. I have been to the supermarket. I purchased herbs rather. You'd say herbs, all these kind of things that are a bit more uh, forced so that they can be understood better on radio and communication, which I like about Canada. But also, I meant just like the Montreal MK Ultra experiments and things like that. It's just if you offshore it a little bit, you get it over there. Then it's also interesting because you have that joint intelligence between Britain and the United States working together for the common greater purpose, let's say. And it's interesting that out of Canada would be, yeah, whatever. So also though, Nachiketa, which I just jumped on a stream the other night, and I want to recommend that just also. Nachiketa did a great collaborative in this weekend with Raphael and who else was up? Mephistophelies was there, right? Mephistophelies was there.
Mephistopheles, who's been presenting on Neuropa about Arbanite history, then Fresh Translator, who's been looking into some of the Fomenko
Right.
stuff, analyzing it, and also Dojo, who's a regular contributor to different panels. This video you pulled up actually is exactly that video. It's just hosted on my
Oh,
channel. So if you go
all
to
right.
maybe hour
Let me
2 hours 30,
also. I'm gonna also give a solid to Nachiketa while I'm here. Just gonna give him a little like because I happen to be on the stream. But everyone should go check out both versions of the stream right here. Okay, and then back to this is book Bible of the Renaissance is asking, did the Bible that we read today, the way we interpret the Bible, right? Was it created?
yeah,
It's a combined, concocted thing, taking maybe inspired by even older books and whatever. But the way we were talking earlier tonight about scribes and the copy press, and we didn't even get into this earlier, but Erasmus or King James translators, William Cecil to Francis Bacon. How real is your Bible? And the German Bible seems to be the one that Joseph Smith liked the most. He said that was the one he was translating from for the King Follet Discourse. And he was marveling at how different it was from the King James Bible, right? And he's completely different in every way. And there's all these things. Even Martin Hipp, who's one of our favorite people ever, the totally Teutonic, cool dude from München, Bavarianized München man. He was talking about, was it Cain und Abel or something like that? Cain and Abel, but meaning like kind of like my juice here says keine Panik, right? Don't panic. So don't, and then Abel is Übel is like, it's like don't be evil or something like that. Was what nothing evil, don't do evil, something like that was what kind of evil means.
So it's
and
the
so
Google
that's a
slogan.
different thing. Yeah, Cain and Abel, don't do evil, something to that effect. But yeah,
one.
kein Übel is like nothing bad, nothing bad, right? Kein Übel. So that's a really, that's a really different way to look at it than Cain and Abel.
Qui mal y pense is what this makes me think of. You know what they put on the, I guess, English coat of arms? Honi soit qui mal y pense. You know, woe upon those who think ill of it.
Yeah.
So you can bring up the video again briefly. Yeah, we're glitching a bit, but it's fine. So just to show that we're showing a document in the first hour, actually. So just try to skip back anywhere, just so we can see the document.
All right. So here you go.
Exactly. So this is a document. It's linked in the description as to whose YouTube channel that belongs to. This is Simeon's work. And he randomly sent this to me, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And it's kind of fun, especially if at any point you've studied, you know, sometimes it can be fun to read something that's academically written. And then it's just great because by now, usually, if you read too many papers, you don't necessarily expect something particularly exciting or interesting, or a paper on alternative chronology. But some people are writing those, such as Simeon. He wrote me, he's like collaborating with some biblical researcher or something like this. Maybe even Ralph Ellis, but this is, I have no idea. It's just speculation, only because he commented on it and said that he did research, Ralph Ellis did some research. In any case, he's discovering quite a few interesting things. One of those being, as you can here see, this discovery of America with 1492, and also having the dating of the apocalypse, according to his calculations, fit that. And what he's basically doing is he's matching certain of his own research with Fomenko's research, and is able, from his point of view, to verify at least a few things. Again, his YouTube channel is linked under that video. And then he also has a recent video where he's talking for 10 minutes, basically about he himself now is revising his own approach to this type of history or academic research because of what he found from Fomenko. Because already before, I believe he was publishing on biblical studies, for lack of a better term. And now he's basically saying, okay, I have to revise a lot because of this new information. But that's kind of great, you know, to have independent people that are willing to change their mind or simply just correlate. And if at the end of the day, whatever they find out, but it's good, the more.
Oh, this is talking about Gleb Nosovsky. We know Gleb.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah. He's talking specifically about Fomenko and Nosovsky's work, and is just correlating it to his own work. So that's why I said, okay, Nachiketa, let's just read some of that live, so people are aware that even in present day, this document is from December 2nd, people actually, you know, are sitting down and writing about this and trying to make sense of it and correlate it with other research, which would be the idea. So that's why we featured that. And later on, we'll just talk about anything and everything. Maybe try going to about hour 2.5 or 3, just so people can see that you're also on the show. So if they want to listen to your part, they can also just do that. Right, there you are.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I couldn't just let them have a nice time, because it was like 2 hours and 20 minutes deep, and I was like, they're doing a fabulous job. And I don't really need to interrupt, but somehow they got into that whole gods and what were we talking about again? Like history
And also about monotheism
inspires
and
myth.
polytheism, and but in any case, I wonder if there's ever any podcast that can sufficiently discuss anything. So as always, I can just encourage people to, if they can, look deeper into this in their own time, or look up different researchers and see what they say.
Yeah, what's it
Obviously,
called? A you. What's that word,
deep
man?
topic.
We were talking about, yeah, the, how do you say it again? Euhemerism? Euhemerism? How do you pronounce that?
Euhemerism.
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 This is the one. So the idea that mythology is presumed to have originated from real historical events. Yeah, dude, Alhambra's cool. Have you ever seen my video from Alhambra when I'm there? Dude, when I went to Alhambra, I was like living in a van, which, is my goal in Spain. And I went up to the top of the hill and I just slept in my van outside of the Alhambra Moorish wall, the Moor, and the fort structure where they were sieged. And while I'm hanging out there in the middle of the day, because I'm waiting for the sun to go down because it's so hot. I think I'm doing a show that evening or something with people in America. A drone hits the roof of my car, which I have this all on video. So like you should watch, like look up my Alhambra video. It's crazy. And then this gypsy dude runs out. It was great. So yeah, you should definitely watch about the whole thing through. It's from 3 hours and 33 minutes long, but I start talking about 220, which just seems like, I don't know. It's a Kabbalist couldn't have done better, you
Yeah,
know?
it's like the golden section or something, right?
All right, and then we're getting into world stage. So now we're back to Syria and the Assad family, which we opened up with. We're going to talk about JFK because all roads lead to JFK. It's crazy. Like everything leads back to JFK every time. And then we'll get into Roy Cohn because he's my boy. But here's the German news. No, is it? What is this? RTV? Is that Russian TV?
Don't, I mean, you could, with that
No, that's
stance, you could probably, with that stance, you could totally give an interview on mainstream Austrian TV if you were to tell them that this is Russian propaganda television, because this
nice.
is basically a local TV from, I want to say, no, from Upper Austria, which is like a
Yeah, I
county in
was gonna
Austria.
say this guy
And
looks
they,
way Austrian to me. Don't take that
yeah,
the wrong
whatever
way.
that,
He just has that
yeah,
serious
yeah,
stare.
whatever that means, right? But this is like one of the,
Doesn't look Russian.
let's say, family operation type broadcasters that actually quite got some traction during the lockdown periods because they actually dared to make some interesting discussions and so on.
Awesome. Based.
Unfortunately, very based, unfortunately, in too many cases, I also have to say, just as with the whole virology topic and also with the geopolitics topic, of course, there's always another layer that could or should be discussed, which, people can argue what idea is a limited hangout to what extent. But in any case, here, what they have is a discussion about Syrians celebrating in the streets of Vienna because of the regime change in Syria. And that's actually the other thing. I'm wondering what the colonel is going to say about this regarding Gladio. But also here, my first idea was like, yeah, this obviously seems like a staged thing. And always the question, just like with the Muslim Brotherhood, if we look at the history even, who are its originators, who are its funders, and so on. And I'd like to know the same about the current conflict, because again, it may well be that these are just operatives being labeled Islamists or whatever type of new group they make up, Al-Nusra, God knows what, yeah. But it may well be the same funding sources in the background that just want to stir up conflict or bring about whatever next scheduled, scripted geopolitical change is supposed to happen. And here, what they mainly talk about in terms of European politics is just this question, okay, what to do with the Syrians now? Because very soon after this was announced, quite a few political pundits, of course, first from the right wing, said like, oh, now it's safe again in Syria. Let's send all the Syrians back home. And there's quite a few Syrians in Austria or in Vienna. I don't have any particular sentiment or relation to them, but I just find it very curious that they use this change now as an excuse. And already some of them, at least, are preparing legal structures to basically arrange for them to be given $1,000, send on a plane home, and that's it. And go rebuild their country. And what they're also bringing up again, which has always been suspicious, is that many of the supposed asylum immigrant seekers mainly are young, able-bodied men that can also travel through all of these countries. But the old men, the children, and the women mainly seem to have been left behind or whatever strange situation. So I'm curious to see how this will pan out overall in the grand scheme of things, and what the effects will be. Because of course, many people now that are more conservative or anti-immigration in Europe, they are also in Germany, they talk about the same thing. They're already considering, oh, how can we send at least hundreds of thousands of those back to their own country, which is would have been something unheard of to even consider only weeks ago, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like it's a bittersweet, I know that Giorgiani's been kind of pushing for the collapse of Syria and Assad, and I know a lot of the Western people, Western OSINT people, are really excited because they see, yeah, and I mean, the idea that a Western Atlanticist power would allow for even more liberty and freedom, particularly for atheists, because there's a lot of students that want to have the capacity to believe whatever they want, even to believe in something not just atheist, but individually.
They want to have the capacity to believe in anything. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it comes down to. A lot of people are not just interested in having a little ghetto to be a 10% Christian in, and it's not a perfect situation to just allow for. I mean, anytime you have a religion that is the secular power, it's dangerous because they'll destroy anything they think of as sinful. And what action does a religious person not find sinful? Like almost all things, especially Christians. I think Christians are the worst. You would never want to have a Christian dictatorship, right? Muslim dictatorship's a little.
The reason. Yeah, that's the thing, because they always love to hate on the Muslim dictatorship, but maybe the Christian dictatorship would be completely unbearable.
Oh, way worse. Oh God,
there only exist Muslim ones. That'd be an interesting
it was. No, think about it. It was. It's objectively I mean, I don't know what you believe in history anymore, but the Colosseum and the idea of the Christians feeding.
I'm not so sure either.
Yeah, but Christians feeding atheists and pagans to the lions, and doing these crazy. I mean, they go into a place where originally, if you were too annoying and you become infamous and you're causing problems for the local government, because a lot of times religions can be allowed until they disturb the peace. If your religion is not disturbing the peace, you go into I mean, Paul did this. He was very surreptitious, because the Apostle Paul, right? He's not an apostle. He's just this guy. He goes into the city and he says, I understand that you worship all these different gods. At the trading circle, you have all these different statues of all your different gods. And just to be polite, they have a statue to the unknown God. The unknown God, just in the sense that if you're a foreigner and you come to our land and you see that there's not a temple to your God, we're going to be the mensch and offer you a decent place that you can worship the unknown God. We God that we don't know, that you know. So Paul's like, I mean, you already have a thing. You already have a temple here to my God. My God is the unknown God. And so this is kind of a usurping, which would have caused a disturbance of the peace. And so, yeah, you can practice your religion, but once it becomes a disturbance of the peace, there's laws against that. I mean, there's laws against, you can do drugs until it becomes a disturbance against the peace. You can practice your weird sexual deviance. In Rome, for the love of God, you could do all kinds of stuff as long as it wasn't a disturbance to the peace. So if it became a disturbance of the peace and they put you through a court trial, they might decide to strip you of your public rights. Okay? And so capitis diminutio maxima or minima, they could give you a certain amount of time to pay back community service, or they could just put you in the Colosseum. And if they put you in the Colosseum, then you're an entertainment piece. They can do whatever they want with you. And it's not always as bad as you think. Sometimes you're in a boat against another boat and they fill it up with water. It's incredible. And then they're just shooting cannonballs at each other. But other times, they they feed you to a lion, or they hang you upside down just for like the weekend, or they drown you in horse manure and they make you eat it. Like whatever horrible things they want, and all these people watch it.
Is the public stage, then I'm not sure how different it is today from what was allegedly happening in these times you are describing.
Oh, well, the big difference was that you had free tickets. So I guess it's kind of similar that you have TV, but that's what TV and it was like free tickets to the monster truck show, free tickets to the Coliseum. Anyone could go to the Coliseum. You had a right to see it. You had a right to see it, and you also had a right to bread. Anytime you needed, like there's bread, you could eat bread, and you had a right to wine. It was so they had wine, bread, and the monster truck show.
It's quite similar to the West today. And also have the right of abortion. I'm not sure if they already had that, but
I think it was a little bit more common. There was plants that were really commonly used for that at the time, for sure. But I don't know if they had
they had the better type of abortions that I'm sure.
But the difference was it was not just a right, like today where like if you want you can pay. In Germany there's an ideology of the right to pay. You have the right to pay for your crimes and for your privileges. But in Rome, it was like free. There were certain things, a certain amount of food. It was like socialized. It was a social fascist state. And Diocletian, right, had demanded that if your father was a baker, you have to be a baker because we have to sustain this economy. And that if your bread costs this much, it will always cost this much. Like this is how much bread's going to cost in the entire empire, or at least in these regions. So it was crazy when you think about how much. It is similar today with subsidies and price caps and minimum wages and maximums and
anyhow, if we understand the financial system just a little bit, or the Federal Reserve, or any of these aspects, and I like to say again, to me, or crypto or anything, the economy appears entirely virtualized. Like on both ends, on the high end and the low end, it's like a virtual, thing. I'm wondering how it's not falling apart, or that apparently still some fundamentals are real, like someone is mining resources, someone is farming somewhere, someone is actually adding value to products.
Hold on, here's a Christian for you. So I resent that remark. I went to Christian school, and they're great people who should be running the world, and everything would be better. They would never do those things. Okay, Cognitive Dissonance Club. Let me explain to you the difference, because when
great Nick, by the way.
When I went to Christian schools a few times too. The only problem was I went during September 11th, and I realized very quickly the way they felt about when a group is in charge, it's very different than when they're not in charge. So when the Christians were put in charge, the first thing they did was make the Colosseums way more violent. They started hanging people, crucifying people upside down, doing all these crazy things. Actually, most of the time you don't crucify people upside down, because it would just be quick, right? So the Christians did these crazy sadomasochistic things leading up into flagellation, and while being in charge of their own state, they decided that they would make crimes out of sins. So if you did something on Sunday or Saturday before Constantine, they would cut off your hand, right, for using your hand. Crazy stuff happened under Christianity, and they forbid people from reading the Bible. They made it almost impossible to get your hands on scripture because you weren't worthy unless you'd done all these things, which were impossible to do. And there were wars between priest clans. This is the other thing, like the Donatins versus the Valentins versus the, even the Marcians leading up to the canonization of scripture. Christians were constantly, into the Didache period, warring against each other. So once they were not allowed to be, once Christians were in exile and not accepted by their clans, not accepted by their states, Christians could live underground in sewers with the gypsies and the Jews, and then they were treating everyone really nicely. Because they were like, hey, it would be in our benefit in a situation where you want to kill us to be really kind to people, which is the best kind of Christian. I totally agree. But once they became in charge of the state, they were far more violent than anyone has ever been in history until maybe the communists. And even that's not really accurate when you get into it. It's actually insanely violent
I mean,
what
in
the
terms
Christians
of
did.
at least apparently aggressive and invasive wars, they are oftentimes led by officially Christian states, no?
Oh, this
I
is
mean,
funny.
officially
Cognitive dissonance
secular,
was
but
being sarcastic, of course. That's hilarious. It's like, oops, I meant the opposite of that. I went to Christian school and they kicked me out. What would Jesus do? LOL. Yeah, Jesus would flip the tables, pull out a whip, and be like pretty upset, I think. But you know what? So would an Iranian dude who didn't like this lady's outfit. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I did think that it was interesting looking at Netanyahu recently, kind of because he's like, hey, if I can't get my own people to like me, you know, like maybe I can find some odd men out in Iran, in Iraq, in these other countries, particularly Syria right now. Maybe eventually I'll just get all of the terrorist groups and unite them behind Israel, which is like kind of a big.
I guess Andreas wants to say it's kind of a based approach. Let's see if Andreas can add himself back to the show. I certainly hope so. Let's see. Andreas is still a little bit stuck. So what I'll do is we'll have a short intermission and then we'll be back. Yo guys, I'm back. So what I'll do is we'll see if Andreas manages to come back. Other than that, I'll simply proceed through the current section and then we'll come back next time. So also what I may be doing actually is go through some of the comments which you guys have written in regards to the Colosseum and the fighting. So yeah, CJ, you mentioned literally bread physiologically lowers your IQ. What we have done quite a few times, and as I'll do it again right here.
God, I call Israel based and I get shut down. I get it, Google. You're just so flippant and just like calm down. Germany's confused. They're like, is he kidding? Is he not kidding?
You gotta go with the program.
Are we at war with Oceania? Haven't we always been at war with Oceania?
Sentiment is shifting quickly. So yeah, you can take a breather. I'll just quickly go through this. So yeah, as we brought up many times, you know, check out Goldkeim, check out the differences in the quality of wheat and bread. I am not exactly sure, if what you're saying is correct, because here you say, so this is interesting, of course, if there was any kind of talk of unrest, they would immediately cut off all supplies of dietary meat to the city of Rome. You're implying basically to make them dumb if they had no meat. If you have only very low grade flour, this may be correct. However, if it's high grade as described here, I don't think that statement is necessarily correct in the same sense. I think even with, what is it, oatmeal, for example, is one of those things that's known like to have super high energy, and many more examples of this. And then let's see, we already got this comment. And then CJ says the people in charge were never Christians. Well, of course, we can argue which one of the supposed...
Any true Scotsman. Okay, all right.
Yeah, who is ever exactly what they claim to be.
Yeah. Raph, you're basically a vegetarian, right? Aren't you vegetarian?
Yeah, because that's the thing I wanted to comment, because you're saying then the people couldn't fight or think. Okay, I'm not sure if I'm good at fighting. I'm not sure if I can still
I think you'd
think.
be all right.
Yeah, I'm not really eating meat in quite some time now, to be honest.
Guys, Raph was in the
Very
army,
rare.
and he's a pretty smart guy. I don't know,
Well,
and
but
like
that's
I know,
a long time ago,
and
the
I know.
army
I'm
means
just
something
saying.
very
I
different
know.
in different places.
Just relax. I'm just saying though, like for context, and also the idea of gorillas too. I think when I think about vegetarian animals like ox and gorilla, I don't think of them as weak. And
then
I'm
why is
one of
the
those
word
weirdos that
gorilla
think
so
animals are
close to
smart.
the word gorilla? Can you tell me that?
Like
Because they're both
guerrilla
living in the
warfare.
jungle.
What do you say, gorilla?
Yes.
Gorilla?
Gorilla and gorilla. Why are they so close?
What's
Is it
gorilla?
because they're both in the jungle? No,
What's
guerrilla
gorilla?
warfare. Yeah, like guerrilla
Oh,
warfare, like you said, and gorilla.
well, yeah. Oh, do you pronounce it differently? You pronounce gorilla differently? I pronounce it the same. My whole life. Is it guerrilla, not guerrilla warfare? Guerrilla, like I guess, yeah.
Good question. I'm not native Spanish or anything, so I can't tell you.
Well, I guess yeah, it has to do with, I mean, interesting. You would use yeah for Spanish, but I've just always I've always called it guerrilla warfare, even though it's spelled differently, and I always just never thought about it like that. That's insane. Anyway, gorillas are pretty strong. They eat nothing but vegetables.
I mean, of course, even it says in the Wikipedia, of course, it means war. So guerrilla, or I don't know how it is in Spanish, but in French, modern day French, guerre is war.
I like this Joe King. He's like, I'm 85% vegetarian. I know there's some people who are like, I'm vegetarian on my ancestors' side, but yeah, I mean, okay, I get your point.
No, I mean, I guess probably with 85, you're probably fine. So I don't know.
I'm pretty sure that eating the right kind of bread, like I think CJ, I gotta say, the bread thing, I have a particular interest in this all of a sudden because I didn't eat bread for a long time because obviously it's poison. Like, dude, everything is. But then it's not my fault. You go to California, you look at anything, it says this will cause you cancer. But the bread that you get in Germany, I'm getting bread, and people look at me like, oh, that's not daytime bread. That's nighttime bread. You're like, what the heck are you talking about? There's different kinds of bread for different times of the day in Germany. They have different nutrients, and there's different reasons you would eat it. The gastronomy of Germany is freaking crazy. I don't know if Austria is exactly the same with bread, but you have different kinds of, like you showed earlier, wheat brands and everything. So you're never seeing it's a dark kind of full seeded brick that you could. It's like an Antifa could break a window with a German loaf of bread. You have to understand, it's not like your bread. So I imagine that's a major thing too. And Diocletian made sure that all the bread was made to a certain standard, the same way the Germans had a certain standard for beer, etc. What about these gorillas? Do we? Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, good. Maybe go, because I think they didn't
back?
actually show the. No, you don't have to. They didn't show the
That's
demonstration really, but the whole discussion basically here was about just the fact that, I don't know, several hundreds or thousands Syrians were celebrating in Vienna city center, and the real contentious point is here, they did not, usually it takes 48 hours if you want to get legal permission from the government. I mean, anyways, to me, that's hilarious because it's almost like, oh, dear prison warden, is it okay to riot a little bit today? But anyways, so But why they were so upset, especially the more right-leaning or conservative individuals, because they said only a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I showed you the images, right? They were locking people in the city center, and they tried to make it difficult for this demonstration to happen, which was like a, let's say, patriotic demonstration against the current government. So there the government was very strict. But then here, all the Syrians coming out to celebrate without even trying to properly announce it or whatever, or not succeeding in it because the time was too short, at least, yeah. And the police had no problem with this whatsoever. So that's another
This
thing that's, making some people upset, and maybe even more than, especially the conservative anti-immigrant people, making them say, oh, now you celebrated, you're so happy, why don't you go back now, haha. And you can really tell quite a few of the right-wing politicians are kind of like smirking at the situation and like sarcastically commenting on it and like, oh, isn't it so great, now we can send all of them back, because in their mind, anyhow, all they're doing is costing money in social security and not paying in enough, right?
Hmm. Okay. And then here's you already tried to show this, but my internet is dead. You're looking at the Al Assad family. Did you have thoughts on their background and what you wanted to say about them and their connection to the French?
Yeah, I mean, without even having researched it, this would have been my first guess. It's quite obvious they are one of those like planted in families, just like with the King of Jordan, where it sounds like, oh, it must be such an old family, but it's literally have been instated, whenever Transjordan was closed down in 1940 or whatever, 50. Here they seem to be a similar case. What I do find interesting is that they're called Assad, right, which is the lion. Yeah? And I believe, yeah, the next thing I have is just a documentary. I don't really have any background knowledge except, yeah, Bashar
Oh,
al-Assad
but they
being
were they
the
were
lion
Al-Vash,
messenger.
but they were Al-Vash, right? So originally it was Al-Vash the Savage. So he changed his name from the Savage to the
But isn't that an interesting switch?
yeah. Where's it at here? Al-Vash, Al-Wash, right there. The Arabic, the Savage.
What is an interesting connection is that they're Alevites. Of course, as Assad family, nothing more than agents. I mean, which very popular family is not. What I do find interesting is they are officially Alevites, and David Ewing Jr. did a presentation on this on my channel about, I guess, Imam Ali and the War of the Levites or something. I still don't claim to have figured out whatever's happening there. But I do find it curious, and just as you said, it seems that at least from what is portrayed, this regime may have been more religiously tolerant than whatever may be coming in next.
Well, that's the
Which,
question, isn't it? I think that's what everyone wants
or
to
maybe
know,
not.
and I think it's not. My hot take is that it's going to be like another Ukraine kind of thing where, they're going to make it into like West Germany, West Berlin, like Berlin in like in 95 to 99 or something like day hookers on the street. It's going to be crazy. That's probably the way that they're going to make it. That's my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's what I expect.
Syria for Western tourists.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because, like, wouldn't you?
It depends on what the underlying principles really are in their supposed whatever Islamist view or whatever they have. Or it depends on whoever these Islamists, claim to be, who are they really? If they are CIA assets, it would make sense to turn it into a resort for rich Western tourists or whatever. I don't know.
I mean, it won't even just be rich Western tourists. It'll be for
Also
so the
rich
way
Russian or
that
Chinese tourists.
the and Dubai, and so it's like it's an offshore it's a Tijuana for the BRICS countries, run by the West, right? So if you can imagine that anything that happens, like Cuba, like they had all these great spying microphone systems to record JFK doing all these prostitutes and teenage girls and everything. And so there's a huge amount of espionage work done by the Soviet Union, and the mafia was associated through the Vatican and through the Catholics to the Soviet Union. So they had all of this information. So the same thing could be done in Syria, the way they're trying to set up Ukraine. I mean, like Ukraine's supposed to be this Western place, and I don't know with Russia also there's more to that. Like the idea that they could create some sort of a military strategy in Syria that can take out Russia. That's clearly what NATO was aiming for, is a war directly with Russia, and probably in the next month. Because if you think about it, they have to set something like that up before Trump is in office. Because if Trump's in office, it's not going to happen. So we're really like at the edge with that. Bummer. Syria is pretty cool looking though, and they're saying that it was devastated by Assad. What do you think?
I mean, of course, is what they say. I don't know. Can you check from when this documentary is? Because it may be a bit older or
Sure.
not. I'm not
I'm going to
sure.
save this to my playlist. 4 days it says, but I don't know exactly when it was uploaded. I don't know. This is a 4-day old documentary theoretically.
Yeah, very
Probably
theoretically.
more like a year. It sounds. I'm listening to the audio right now. It sounds like it's made within the last few years. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's impossible with these countries because we would need someone like Abiza from each of one of these countries to get any bearing on what may actually be happening in there. Because with the
Right.
propaganda amped up on all sides, I wouldn't be able to claim anything.
I mean, do you watch Syrian Girl Partisan?
No,
Oh, dude.
I don't know her.
She's amazing. This is her on the right. She did a cool video with Kim, who, is also pretty great. I like Kim a lot. I've met her a few times. And I respect and support her work. But Syrian Girl is on the right here, and she's talking about things going on in Syria for the last 11 or 12 years. And I think she just did an Alex Jones one as well. Oh, and she's talking with Bill Ottman. She knows all our good people. Syrian Girl Partisan. Is that it? I don't know exactly where. Oh, there we go. There we go. Cool. What? I must have unclicked. Come on, man. Come on, man. She did a video with Alex Jones, I think, recently. I wanted to find it here. Let me see. Maybe if I type that, I'll just put in Partisan Girl at Alex Jones. Let me see if I can find. None of them look serious. Come on, man. I give up. Let me see if I can find that without. Latest. Well, all right. If I can find it, I'll post it a link to you. But generally, she did do a video with InfoWars recently. And this one's really good. This is like what? This is like 35 minutes long. I would recommend watching the Kim video. It's pretty great. And she explains a lot about what's been going on in Syria and her point of view. And
yeah, the one thing, at least again, if we give some credence to the idea that geopolitics has a reality to it and is not only a complete world act stage, which it may be, then what I wanted to do, but I didn't find the release yet, was of course to check out what Alexander Mercouris says about it from the Duran. But when I first checked, it was just on the weekend, I guess, and they didn't have a release yet. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure the Duran will have some recent information on this as well, which probably is interesting to get a at least different perspective from what most likely most Western media outlets are gonna say.
yeah, I mean, it looks to me like the real victim, obviously, is Iran. And the villains are really the West and the East by making this into a place of contingency, because there's really no reason for this struggle. And I don't know, it looks like that's not just going to be military personnel, but civilian casualties in mass with all of these drone strikes. And worse, right? Because once you destroy all the
Okay, but just to
all
be
the
clear, because
infrastructure, it will attack each
I
other.
didn't really catch that yet. So is it so basically whoever took over without a fight, and now Israel started drone striking Syria? Am I getting that right? But that was only after the country already got regime changed, no?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, like, they're let me see. I don't know if that's actually true. I think it was all kind of built into a military. Man, oh God. And now there's this new Palestinian strikes that just happened right now. Basically, Israel's at war. It doesn't really it's I don't think it's fair to say that Syria was going to have a regime change without the help of Israel. Israel's been a major player in that. And the destabilization, because Israel is the size of Connecticut, it's a pretty small little place.
Right.
It's trying to do its best to expand. Well, but there's this idea, right? Greater Israel.
This idea.
We want Greater Israel, right? Because Greater Israel is the sea to the sea eventually. It has to be across the sea to the sea. And so there's been huge amounts of contracts, military contracts, but also corporate contracts expanding into the regions of Iraq and into Egypt. And then there's also clandestine efforts in Saudi Arabia. But of corporate contracts that have happened because it just makes sense to make business agreements to make corporations that are offshore of Israel, right? Corporations from like the United States have major investments from Saudi Arabia and to have majority control of those corporations by Israelis. And so this has tied Saudi Arabia into this sort of economic bipartisan alliance that was unexpected to emerge. And so, I mean, Iraq, you already know because of Halliburton and every other corporation that's been in Iraq connected to the United States. But they're expanding, and of course, Lebanon was always sort of a secular place that we remember. Like, this is where a few years ago there was this major strike and explosions of perhaps weapon armories. And we were saying earlier that a free place is a place that can cultivate anything, like peaceful people, hippies, Wiccans, lesbians, terrorists. Like, it's a free place. Anything can happen. So, but that's also why it was something that exploded. But the eventual goal, I don't know. I'm not sure if I would say, I don't know. Do you know more? Because I don't actually know if the regime change happened before.
Well, from the little bit that I understand, because the first reports, at least officially, they all kind of claimed, oh, there was basically no resistance, nobody was really fighting, they didn't talk anything about casualties. So it seemed as if the coup itself, in terms of taking over the capital and taking over the state broadcaster, which in this game always appears to be, the victory condition, which is also kind of hilarious to me. But anyways, they did that within a few weeks, just, slowly coming down through these cities. That's what the, state broadcast in Austria was telling me, more or less. And that's it.
Let's
they already know about it?
Well, Grok's usually pretty good. The regime change in Syria happened before the Israeli airstrikes. According to various reports, the Assad regime change was overthrown by rebel forces on December 8th.
Briefly, as Valiant Joker is bringing this up, 500 years worth of oil. Of course, we don't know exactly with abiogenic oil, how much is there really, but because you brought up the Austrian military earlier, and I even brought this up, I think, on Nachiketa's show, in terms of belief systems, and then joking, oh, I can join the Austrian army, and these missions, maybe it still exists. It existed for a very long time, and it's still ongoing, I think, as part of a UN peacekeeping mission. One of the missions was to guard the Golan Heights in Syria. And I even technically know individuals, I think, who have been there. So that's a real thing. And then again, I just think it's so hilarious because Austria, since ever, claims to be neutral in the past years, and especially now with Sky Shield, which is like a NATO supposed defense rocket battery they want to install. It's a complete joke. But even well before that, if you send your nationals and your soldiers to guard an oil field in Syria, is that really a neutral action? Of course, they make a joke with the United Nations and give you some declaration why it is, but like, is it really? Yeah. So
There was
Austrians have
another
been
that
working for
reminds me.
Trump for a long time, you know?
Yeah, there was another thing like because of that, like the natural gas reserves in Iraq that they're doing the same thing. That the West knows that they don't have the infrastructure on purpose to take out the natural gas without the West coming in, and so every time there's a negotiation, they end up using Israel ends up in the United in the West ends up controlling the like the contracts that for Iraq. And there's I think there's another one with Turkey. The next one is Turkey because Turkey's oil is where they put the Kurds where the oil is. So there's this whole thing for the human rights agreement, and it's pretty clear the next country to go will be Turkey, because Turkey's not been fully following what the Atlanticists want, and so they're gonna do something probably. I think the next thing will be Turkey.
Well, but then who would be, even within this game, who would be the protector of whoever is not the Atlanticists? It would be Russia, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's the BRICS and Central.
Yeah, but then again, the question is, what was the deal made? Someone also commented this, that this time, again, the Russian jets or whatever, and I don't think that they are too occupied with Ukraine, to be honest, by now, didn't just fly over and stop the rebellion like last time. That's what happened with ISIS in 2014 or whatever, no? What's different this time? Even geopolitically or narrative-wise.
Maybe because it's easier to get rid of if you need a stable government in a region that does what you need it to do during a wartime, you get rid of the democracies that you installed in order to keep chaos in the first place. So creating dictatorships in places where there's democratic chaos, and creating democratic chaos in places where there was order before.
All right, I mean, creating chaos, but still, why wait 10 years for this? Because all that it makes me think of is this, I would say by now, iconic speech in front of the Arab League by Gaddafi. That's the moment when I wish I could speak and understand Arabic, because just it sounds so cool. And Gaddafi explaining to the assembly, look, my Arab brothers, what do we share? Let's be honest, we share nothing but this house. Look what they did to Saddam. They just come in and they hang him without any trial or anything, proper procedure. What are we doing? And you never know, you can be next. And then we know 1-2 years later, Gaddafi, at least officially, whatever, was dead. Libya was regime changed. And you see the camera cut in that second for 3 seconds to Assad. And Assad is sitting there like, ha ha ha, he's laughing. And, and then in 2014, I was like, oh, maybe he's got some other deals. Maybe he can really stay in power. So I'm really wondering, and I'll research this or look out for that information, what changed that this time he just left and didn't bomb whoever tried to regime change him. I really don't, because also I don't see that he would have had a fallout with Putin or whatever officially. So what's the difference now?
I think that's like one of my scares about Islam, is that it's used to, especially today's militant variety that we're talking about, is used to unite aggressively a mass amount of people for a state into a similar belief. It's like a magnet. They're all just one direction. And then it doesn't, in 20 years, you can replace that with Westernism, because it just takes one generation. It's so quick to break, but if you do that, it's a really quick way to get a bunch of people to all be the same, who before that were all really different. And that's what it was like in Syria. Syria is filled with different races and nations of people, ethnic groups, whatever, that had different, not just religions, but languages and cultures. And people say that the Kurds have essentially no written, we brought this up a little bit earlier. The Kurds don't have very much written poetry or anything like that. But then that makes you wonder, why not? What happened to it? Or did it really not exist? Are we sure on that? Because it seems so much more likely that it was taken from them, because they're pretty cool. The Kurds are pretty cool. I'm a big fan of the Kurds. So you look at all of those people, and if you force them to be Muslim, then in a generation when you use harp and you have them all watching the same episodes of South Park and Friends, then you can get them to all react the same way quicker than if they were just still different.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good point. It still does not necessarily explain why there was this 10-year delay. So, and also because everything seems so virtualized, both
That's
economy
the
and
delay, though.
warfare. That's a delay.
It's like the aggression of getting. Yeah, the delay is that period to force people, and they're starting to get people to all conform to the same culture.
Okay, and before you need the time to get people angry enough against supposed democracy or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a group of people to all watch the same thing, and they're all forced to watch the same thing, they're all watching the same shows, and they're all going to the same schools, and they're conforming to this. Eventually, it's sink or swim. You get an entire population that's one way. I mean, it's really very difficult to exist otherwise unless you're conforming to it. That's the struggle against any sort of. I mean, it's the religion that amputates, and every religion, kind of in a sense, is trying to amputate like evil from the human spirit, right? So it forces you to think that everything is evil. All right, this is the JFK part. We knew this was coming. Yeah, this is what. Okay, yeah. This gets it. The delays about management programming. I'm serious. Like, so this is why reruns exist. Every country I go to, I'll be like, it's a little bit late now, but 10 years ago for sure, I'd be like, oh, when did they start airing Friends? Oh, when did they start airing ER? Because it matters when they started watching that show. And you've got, when did you watch Star Trek? I mean, I just saw some of that. Was it Rhine Schiff Enterprise? Right, like Star Trek dubbed in German.
Raumschiff and Enterprise, yeah.
Raumschiff Enterprise. Sorry, my bad. But this is crazy how much of the European culture is time managed reruns in order to get everyone onto the same page as Americans. You know? And so the easier thing to do would just be to force everyone to have the same reactions, and then their kids, they can all, yeah, you get the point of the delay programming. Okay. The JFK part, though.
Just because you brought it up, we'll get back to this briefly. I'm showing it just briefly. I'm not playing it because they may be quite intent on their copyright, but do you know about this? So you have to know about
this sounds great. So, it's a fan film?
This is Michael Bulli-Herbig and a few others that, especially back then, they made a movie called The Shoe of Manitou, which was like a slapstick, or I'm not sure how you call it, like a comedy variant of the Winnetou ideas. And then 2 years later, what they did is they made a parody on Enterprise, and that's what it looks like. So here you can see like an obviously gay Spock, and also not so, clear what's up with the captain. And anyways, and then they made some skits, but they also made a whole like for cinema movie out of this. Yeah, I just thought like you eventually definitely have to check it out. Most, I guess, German-speaking people know it because especially this guy, he's gotten like super famous because that first movie they did about Manitou really hit all the records. So let's see if we can find it. Yeah. So there you have him.
Oh wow!
And then they're dancing, whatever. It's quite a fun movie.
Is this like one of those Karl May books, like the?
Yeah. More or less. That's kind of like what they're doing. And even here you say it's super perforator. So here they're like singing,
dude,
super perforator.
Oh my god. Well, yeah, I think every American should know about Karl May just because you said that, which is this dude from Germany who never.
Okay, wait. So technically, you don't even have the Winnetou stories in the same way, because that would also be strange if the Germans, for any reason, have their own set of supposed Wild West stories, and the Americans get their own stories, right?
Yeah, we never heard of any of these stories.
Strange. That's very
Never
strange.
heard of any of these. Yeah, but this dude, did he ever even go anywhere? Has he ever been? I think he never like left Germany, right? Wasn't he like afraid to travel or something?
Did anybody ever even exist? I don't know by now. So.
He was from a family of weavers, cloth makers, textile makers, a poor family, they say. I don't know how true that was, but he wrote, as Raph just explained, all about cowboys and Indians and never went to America. And he made up like tons and tons of interesting stories about cowboys and their lives on the prairies and what it was like to hunt buffalo. And, he never went there. His whole thing, his obsession with the idea of colonization and frontiersmen, was more emphasized by his love with the indigenous natural sauvage, right? Like this man of less, well, of a different civility, Like they were definitely civilized the way he described Native Americans. But yeah, there's none of this in America. If you're an American and you've ever heard of Karl May, type 1. And if you never have, type 0. But yeah, Karl May. I've now just started looking into it, trying to find more Karl May movies because apparently there are tons of movies based on it. So if that's kind of a Karl May thing, I would love to know more about that. But okay, so did you want to go into the RFK thing? Tell me about this guy. Look at this. Zeros all the way down, dude. Turtles. You guys have to look into Karl May, dude. It's freaking wild stuff.
So here, this is another of those things I only stumbled across. I have to see all of the things he says. Also, I don't necessarily think I have to agree with what he says, but the main point here just being, I did not know that JFK filmed his own demise or whatever. This is the whole point here, that 2 months before the whole thing supposedly went down, JFK was like making a film about himself, and this guy's explaining it. And I have to look deeper into this, but honestly, this gives me these, like, how do you say, emergency run practice vibes,
Uh,
which,
yeah, Stanley Kubrick stuff, right?
and then because then the next question is, even though it has this heavy trauma, of course, that's the main thing. I have already heard with various of these very grand events that also they may be different than what was portrayed, not only in terms of how they came about, but also what the officially presented result was and what really happened. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard about this, even in regards to 9/11. There's different ideas. You have, on the one hand, we could be debating about what actually happened in terms of how it came about. But then the other question is, what are the actual results? For example, uh, who or how many individuals actually died, in what way? Was all the footage shown genuine, and so on? And maybe there's similar questions with JFK, because there's various versions. From what I understand, even the JFK thing, they say, is Mandela affected. I don't know, because I didn't research it deeply enough, but they talk about 4 people in the car or 6 people or this and that. So there's very many strange things going on here. So I think in this talk that you just showed, he's not suggesting that the end result is different, but to me, it gives these, like, 9/11 practice run vibes, where then to me everything is put into question, basically. Also, because even in the politics today, as you mentioned, so much hinges on this idea. So very suspicious. You wanted to show the falling man, and now you removed.
Is it back? Okay. Yeah, no, I don't know if I should
Yes,
even
you're
show
back.
it. I guess I did anyway. Yeah, I mean, interesting comment, man. That's cool. So why JFK staged his own murder in a James Bond started spot fight? What? Okay, let me. How do I fix
Oh yeah. Basically, you showed one of
that?
those things
All
I was
right,
thinking of.
JFK
Yeah.
staged his
I
own
didn't
murder
catch
in
it,
a,
but yeah.
and this is from Vanity. This is from Vanity Fair. Oh wait, I have the
Do you
article
want to
here.
show
My
it?
page
Okay.
won't load. There we go.
Great.
Yeah. So this is from Vanity Fair, which is kind of interesting. civil rights leader, Martin Luther King. A film in which JFK play acted his own assassination is worth revisiting. When did this happen? In one of the film's vignettes taken Saturday, JFK sits in the captain's chair of an aft deck of the president's yacht, the Honey Fitzgerald, reading the poems of Anita Faye, spouse of JFK's wartime Paul Red Faye. Kennedy then displays his own palm for the couple, interpreting his lifelines. What did he see? What did he say? In fact, 2 months later, he was assassinated. Part of a homemade spy thriller she and the president had devised. At one point, the film is such a, I mean, is it available to watch, or where is this film?
That would be something worthwhile checking out. I didn't do the research yet.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess making a fun movie would make sense. That's the kind of thing you would do in 1963 if you were Fitzgerald. You had some money. Kennedy, you'd probably be playing with these 8mm film cameras or more. I mean, they're toys. They were toys back then. Yeah, I'd like to see it. It seems like completely believable that would happen. Well, so Robert Knudsen, let's get his name. JFK spy film. Or JFK film, that's probably fine. And, all right, I'll look for it. I'll save that because I don't know if it'll be hard to find immediately. It looks like it's not like on the internet yet, or not like clear to find. And then what's this? This is about Putin's network in Europe.
Yes. So what I'd say is today we can go through the next few more links and then we'll just stop there because we're already at 2 hours. So this one is interesting. It's just always sometimes, fun to watch propaganda
Okay.
and then counter propaganda. And here, of course, what they claim in terms of, Putin's network in Europe, whatever connections he has to different politicians, what has to be said is that until 2014 or whatever, what they say in the West was the annexation of the Crimea, where I'm not sure if they ever actually made a survey on the Crimea itself as to what the people really think there, which I would love to know. But anyhow, ever since then, it was super cool to be in the West or to be in Europe and a politician and to cozy up with Russia, either to make deals, to be shown with Putin, to get some post at Gazprom afterwards, like Gerhard Schröder, or like there's many more. I'm sure you can easily find lists online where it was normal. But also, from what I understand from people that do more background research, Gazprom, for example, appears to be one of these world stage entities where it's also not exactly clear, just like with the CIA or whatever, what is the front and what is actually happening in the back. And also, I can only assume with organizations as large as those, they maybe also aren't all the same. But, Gazprom, of course, huge organization, very known. But anyways, here now, years later, on the cultural channel, let's say, they make a big fuss about anyone who ever had any relations with Russia. So, yeah, it may be a bit of a one-sided view, but still it's interesting to see, of course, naturally, all sides are trying to exert their influence and, get things done in their favor. Link to Titanic.
Every time. Well, okay, Russiagate. Anyway, Denke Lage Anstoß December. And this is MGK1.
Yeah, so here, these are some German people. Some of them on the lower end, I even know both of them or have met them at least once or twice. So Thomas on the lower left, we have already shown in a different time talking about the economy. And here, all I wanted to bring up is because they speak of some type of reshuffling of the cabinet or something. And do I understand correctly that currently there is some type of a plan which is called Kellogg Plan? I mean, aside from even just Kellogg's, right, which is very famous, I guess, family at least, or brand name, to say the least. You can open the next tab because that's what Thomas brought up here, because he mentioned that apparently 100 years ago there already was a similar plan, and then I thought maybe we want to take a look at that, which is right. Yeah, I mean, here it says General Treaty for Renunciation of War as an Instrument of National Policy. I mean, doesn't that just sound wonderful? And apparently back then here it says the United States Secretary of State was also called Kellogg. So I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. Well, Frank. So Kellogg wrote this. He was a politician and he was Secretary of the State, and he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1929 during the crash for the creation of this. And I think he was. I don't know. I think he was associated with the Kellogg family. Is he not? He moved to Minnesota in 1865. Interesting. I don't know. Maybe he's not part of the Kellogg family, but I thought he was. Anyway, he part of like the Kellogg eugenicist cereal family, but I wouldn't be surprised. He must be. Kellogg joined the federal government with Theodore Roosevelt, asked Kellogg to prosecute the antitrust case. Kellogg was appointed the special counsel in the Interstate Commerce Commission. That's a crazy thing because then you can make money in the wild, like the tariffs for crossing the road. Hey, we can just make people to cross a bridge here. Let's build a road that requires them to take a bridge.
But
and they have to pay
I mean, only 10 years ago, whatever, I was in the US, and it's not like there are not any tolls if you're trying to get into New
That's what I'm
York
saying.
or if you're trying to get through certain. I mean, it was crazy. I was like,
Yeah.
and back then the gas price, whatever was changing, was expensive enough, but then damn, you're like paying 70% extra if you want to get anywhere, for this and that interstate or whatever they call it. Wow. Easy Pass or what? How is it called? Or whatever different systems they have concurrently, and it's like insane. Because then if you really want to go through the US, you're like beholden to 5 different systems. I guess every state has a really nice contract with these surveillance camera equipment, guys. It's amazing.
What's the name of the guy who started the NY?
That's why there are no more brigands on the road, Maybe there's still some radar traps for high traffic, but if you can just toll all the roads, it's perfect.
I'm trying to remember the name of that guy. There's a guy who he came up with this for the New York toll bridges, and was while everyone else had, like the mayor and everything else, they didn't make nearly as much money as the toll commission. He made like 3 or 4 times as much a month as the government was making a year, and so he was completely in charge. I can't remember his name right now, but we're near the end, so we'll save it. Yeah, Kellogg though won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1929. That's pretty crazy. And then Gotham, Oakland Island. Did you want to bring up him before we go? He's pretty cool.
Yeah, so just briefly, this is someone recommended to me by Chase, who's apparently running for mayor in Gotham. Oh, no, sorry, in Gotham, in Oakland. And you can see him there with the,
that's kind of a
Batman sign. And apparently he even managed to like oust the former mayor. I like didn't read up on all the details, but just basically I think it's cool, shout out to someone who appears to be doing like real grassroots politics and actually, tries to understand things and so on. And if all people would approach government and these offices like this, then we actually could have a, I don't know, benevolent or functioning administrative structure. Yeah, so I just thought I'd give him a shout out. And I guess anyone who's interested in Oakland or whatever, or living in San Francisco or California area, maybe it's something interesting for them.
I like that you said Oakland. It was kind of like Disneyland. It's like, yeah, Oakland. Software. Sorry, no, I've heard about this book. I've been suggested this book. I was gonna get it on Audible, but out of print. I think you can still get a copy of it some other way, right? That's crazy. What?
Yeah, also when I looked it up, it was available in Germany. Just look at Amazon.de. Maybe then you anyhow you're in Germany right now. So
340. What? Software, is this different? Okay, maybe this version of it. You just can't get that particular copy of it. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So
no. But this is no. This is a different book.
It's different.
No, but just go on Amazon.de for Germany, and then I'm pretty sure it's available there because I think I looked it up. Or I put it on. Okay.
Soft war, guys. Come on. Wow, it just keeps pushing over and over again. Wow, for real? Can you stop it? How do I?
I mean, it had it in autocomplete with Jason Lowry, but yeah.
That took a lot of work to get what I wanted. Okay. And yeah, it looks like it's out of print on D as well. 99.
That's crazy.
Interesting.
Anyhow, that's
Cool.
a topic
So
we'll
this is the
discuss when we
Bitcoin one
when we
that's
come
been recommended.
when we come back to it, because also you mentioned, how did you say it? Like, you always need a Bitcoin maximalist to explain to you why it's all gonna be fine. And I'm kind of on a similar wavelength, but also, you know, there may be additional aspects to this, so this is definitely something I want to check out more.
So guys, also I'm sure if you go online you can find a copy of this somehow. United States Space Force. Cool. We'll talk about Royco next time. It's been a lot of fun. Raph, thank you for being
so
here.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody, if you want to get the links, you can go to commency.at. They're available up here on his website.
In the description.
Have a good night.
Thanks, y'all.